Have you ever wondered what happens when hope shatters into 1,000 pieces? When the pain is so overwhelming that the only way out seems to be reshaping the world, no matter the cost. Today, we're diving into the mind of one of Naruto's most enigmatic and complex characters, Pain, the leader of the Akatsuki. Prepare for a journey that will make you question the boundaries between peace and despair, and show you that not every villain is what they seem. What you're about to discover might change your perception of human suffering and the relentless pursuit of a better world. In the heart of a world ravaged by incessant conflicts, where the shadow of war was a constant and peace, a fragile, distant concept, a boy named Nagato was born. His story begins in a humble village, located in a smaller nation often used as a battlefield by the great ninja powers. From a very young age, Nagato witnessed the fragility of life, the scarcity of resources, and the terror that each new confrontation brought. The environment in which he grew up was a cauldron of uncertainties, where survival depended on luck, the cruelty of others, and the ability to hide from the violence that erupted without warning. Children grew up in fear, adults with resignation, and the idea of a peaceful future seemed an unattainable utopia. Nagato's childhood was marked by deprivation and a lack of security. Every distant explosion, every desperate cry that echoed through the fields, planted a seed in his mind. That peace, as they knew it, was a fragile illusion, easily shattered by human ambition and ignorance. This initial perception led him to seek a path through a world where pain was extinct, where violence had no place. From the beginning, Nagato dreamed of a place where no one had to go through what he did, where the innocence of children wouldn't be stolen by the brutality of war. The first psychological trait that emerged in Nagato was a profound empathy, a remarkable ability to feel and understand the suffering of others. This empathy was accompanied by an ardent desire to protect the innocent and interrupt the cycle of hostility. He believed in a future of harmony, where understanding would prevail over discord and where every individual's life would be valued. This initial belief, almost naive in its purity, propelled him to seek solutions to the misery that surrounded him. However, the world in its relentless cruelty still held brutal lessons that Nagato was about to learn. There was something, a dark twist, that no one saw coming, and that would forever alter the course of his life and his ideals. The trigger that shattered Nagato's innocence and idealism was brutal and definitive. The loss of those he loved most, his parents, in a tragic and senseless incident during a battle. He witnessed the abrupt and violent departure of precious lives, an event that not only took his loved ones, but also splintered Nagato's very essence. From that point on, the world, once seen as a place capable of redemption and where peace was an achievable goal, transformed into an insurmountable stage of pain. Hope began to fade, replaced by an abyss of despair and an overwhelming sense of powerlessness. This devastating experience marked the beginning of a profound psychological transformation. Nagato, once a young man who dreamed of peace through mutual understanding, began to reflect the brutality that surrounded him. His internal conflict was palpable and excruciating. How could he reconcile his unwavering desire for peace with the relentless reality of war, which continued to claim innocent lives? Externally, he was confronted with the indifference and cruelty of others, reinforcing the belief that humanity was incapable of learning from its mistakes and that violence was an uneradicatable evil. Psychology would explain this transformation through the concept of post-traumatic stress disorder. The extreme trauma Nagato experienced may have led to a distorted reinterpretation of reality, where trust in others and in the inherent goodness of humanity was severely undermined. His mind, in search of a way to cope with unbearable pain and powerlessness, began to create radical defense mechanisms. The pursuit of peace, once altruistic and based on ideals of cooperation, began to be tinged with a sense of urgency and a growing desire for control. The pain of the past became a catalyst, propelling him down a path of no return, where compassion was gradually replaced by cold determination. And it was there that everything began to crumble, paving the way for a new and dangerous philosophy. Nagato's mind, now under the influence of profound losses and overwhelming traumas, began to reshape dramatically and disturbingly. The desire for peace, once pure and idealistic, remained, but the methodology for achieving it underwent a radical transformation. He came to believe that the only way to eradicate war and suffering was by imposing an even greater pain, a pain so overwhelming and universal that no one would dare return to conflict. This new way of thinking manifested in his words and actions, which revealed a cold determination, a surprising emotional detachment, and an unshakable conviction that his methods, however extreme, were the only solution. Nagato, now under the identity of pain, saw himself not as a destroyer, but as a necessary instrument to purify the world, a surgeon who needed to cause pain to excise evil. To understand what was going on in his mind, we can rely on psychological analogies and behavioral theories. His vision of peace through pain can be compared to aversion therapy, where exposure to an intense negative stimulus seeks to extinguish an undesirable behavior, in this case, war and humanity's inherent violence. He believed that by experiencing the true extent of suffering and despair, humanity would be forced to recognize the value of coexistence and abhor any form of conflict. His actions, though devastating and seemingly cruel, were, in his own distorted logic, a means to a greater end, the creation of a new world order built upon a lesson learned from the bitterest of experiences. He did not seek destruction for its own sake, but rather the creation of a world where peace was an unquestionable reality, even if it meant burning the bridges of the past. The true ideal behind his actions, though transformed, was still dormant, waiting for the moment to manifest in its most extreme form. Nagato's point of no return solidified when he fully embraced the idea that the only way to achieve lasting peace would be through a cycle of imposed pain and learning for humanity. His worldview completely changed. Diplomacy, mutual understanding, and peaceful agreements became mere illusions, incapable of curbing humanity's intrinsic nature for conflict. For him, the only language humanity would truly understand, the only one capable of generating permanent change, was that of widespread shared suffering, a pain so profound that it would engrave the lesson of peace in every soul. At this stage, Nagato began to deeply explore the morality and ethics of his actions, rationalizing them meticulously. He argued that the temporary pain he caused, however excruciating, was a small price to pay for a future of eternal peace. His words were laden with a disturbing logic, yet for him, unquestionable. If the world has never known true pain, how can it value true peace? Humanity is like a spoiled child who only learns through punishment. This perspective invites us to a profound and uncomfortable moral dilemma. Could pain be a necessary path to transformation and the evolution of human consciousness? And what if, in some way, he was right in his premise, even if his methods were so extreme, devastating? The question hanging in the air is disturbing and forces us to confront our own values. To what extent does the pursuit of an ideal, however noble, justify the use of methods that cause suffering and destruction? The answer isn't simple, and pain forces us to delve into the complexity of this question. Delving deeper into pain's psychological analysis, his actions can be understood through the lens of the effort justification theory, where the intensity of the experienced suffering leads to an even greater valuation of the ultimate goal. For him, peace could not be a mere idealized concept. It needed to be a value earned through a deep and painful collective experience. He saw himself not as a cruel individual or a tyrant, but as a catalyst for a global awakening, a God who would bring salvation through a difficult method, yet, in his perspective, inevitable and necessary for humanity's evolution. Pain, for him, was a didactic tool, a means to teach the world the true cost of war. His logic, however shocking and counterintuitive it may seem to most, can be validated by studies that demonstrate how extreme traumatic experiences can lead to radical shifts in perception and behavior, shaping how an individual interacts with the world and pursues their goals. We can draw parallels with historical or fictional figures who, after enduring situations of great adversity and suffering, adopted drastic and sometimes controversial methods in pursuit of their ideals, believing that the end justified the means. The complexity of pain lies precisely at this point. His actions were not the result of a disturbed mind in the traditional sense of madness, but rather a cold and calculating logic, born of profound suffering and the unshakable conviction that there was no other way to break the vicious cycle of violence. He wasn't insane, but a strategist of pain, an architect of a future he believed to be the only possible one. It wasn't madness. It was cold calculation forged in the fire of tragedy. What remains after pain's passage is an indelible trail of destruction and a profound reflection on the consequences of a relentless pursuit of peace, pushed to its most extreme limits. The impact of his actions is not limited to material damage and lives lost. It irrevocably shapes the world around him, forcing nations to confront the true nature of war and the fragility of coexistence. His legacy manifests in altered relationships between villages, redefined alliances, and, most importantly, in the minds of those who survived his attacks, who now carry the memory of the pain he inflicted. We can discuss the real and fictional consequences, observing how the NAGATO universe transformed after his interventions. Pain's philosophy, though brutal, left a mark that forced leaders and peoples to rethink their approaches to peace. The philosophical reflection that emerges is powerful and invites us to a self-examination. Who are we to judge an individual's pain and the extreme measures they take to try to overcome that pain and impose their vision of a better world? The line between right and wrong becomes blurred when we consider the depth of suffering that shaped his convictions and the urgency of his purpose. The myth of pain, therefore, is not just the story of a villain who caused destruction, but that of a human being pushed to the limits of his existence, who sought peace with a painful intensity and unshakable conviction, even if by questionable means. He became a symbol of pain and distorted hope, but perhaps he was not the last to tread this path, and his legacy continues to echo in future generations. And so, the journey through pain's mind leads us to a somber but necessary reflection. His story forces us to confront the central question: can peace be born from pain? Or is the cycle of suffering destined to perpetuate, no matter how well-intentioned the actions? Pain, with his visible and invisible scars, is a mirror to the complexity of the human condition, a reminder that the pursuit of a better world can, paradoxically, lead to the most challenging paths. Think about it. What is the price of your peace?